Welcome to this brief presentation on Mao, the Unknown Story, a biography of Mao Zedong, authored by Jun Chang and John Halliday. Jun Chang and John Halliday are a husband and wife team that have authored other works on notable Chinese historical figures such as Madame Sun Yat-sen, published in 1986, and Empress Dowager Cixi, published in 2013. Halliday is an Irish historian specializing in the history of Soviet and East European Communist parties, and Chang received her PhD in linguistics from the University of York in 1982. Their subject of focus in this book is Chairman Mao Zedong, leader of the Chinese Communist Party from 1935 up till his death in 1976. Mao is notable first and foremost for being the founder of Mao Zedong thought and inspiring Maoist movements across the world, such as in Sri Lanka, Laos, and other parts. Mao is also famous, or rather infamous, for his policies of the Great Leap Forward and Cultural Revolution, as well as being China's statesman. Mao Zedong thought and his policies, although reinterpreted, remain a source of legitimacy for the Chinese Communist Party even today, and Mao laid the foundation of China's modern political system. Although I'm unable to go into much detail about these events, please do check out the article linked in the video description below for a more detailed timeline and analysis of Mao's rise to power. 1st January 1912 saw the founding of the Republic of China after the overthrow of the Qing dynasty and the abdication of the emperor. Sun Yat-sen's Kuomintang nationalist forces declared the Republic of China and took over as the government. On 23rd July 1921, the Chinese Communist Party was founded in Shanghai as a response to discontent amongst the Chinese people, known as the May 4th Movement, in protest to the Chinese government's response to the Treaty of Versailles in 1919. Millions of executions would later take place under the direction of Chiang Kai-shek, Nationalist Party leader, in what was later known as the Shanghai Massacre. This massacre caused the evacuation of the communists from the urban centers towards other places such as the Jiangxi Soviet in the countryside. This would be the beginning of a civil war that would last up to 1949. One notable event of the Civil War was the Long March, which occurred from 1934 till 1935 after the Jiangxi Soviet was evacuated by Mao and the Red Army. The heroism attributed to the Long March would later inspire many young Chinese to join the Chinese Communist Party in the 1930s and early 1940s. It was also a period where Mao solidified his control over the CCP, which he eventually achieved in January 1935. In the culmination of tensions that started with the 1931 Japanese invasion of Manchuria, Japan invaded China in what was known as the Second Sino-Japanese War, capturing Shanghai and Nanjing. It forced a stalemate between Japanese and Chinese forces until the end of World War II, and saw the formation of the United Front between the Communist and the Nationalist government to fight the Japanese. Following the end of World War II in 1945, hostilities between the Chinese Communist Party and the Kuomintang government resumed until the eventual communist victory and the declaration of the People's Republic of China on 1st October 1949. From 1956 to 1966, political relations between the PRC and the USSR broke down, caused by doctrinal divergences that arose from different interpretations and practical applications of Marxism-Leninism, such as de-Stalinization. In 1958, in an attempt to introduce a more Chinese form of communism, Mao launched the Great Leap Forward. The aim was to transform the agricultural base of China's society into an industrial one by mass mobilization of labor to improve agricultural and industrial production. The plan caused a massive decline in agricultural output, which, together with poor harvests, caused a famine that led to 56 million deaths. In an attempt to reassert his authority and regain control of the CCP from the reformist camp that emerged following the failure of the Great Leap Forward, Mao launched the Cultural Revolution in 1966, aiming to purge the country of impure elements and revive the revolutionary spirit. It aimed to erase capitalist and traditional Chinese influences of the People's Republic and introduce the philosophy of Mao Zedong thought, or Maoism. February 1972 saw the visit of U.S. President Nixon to China, marking the resumption of diplomatic ties between China and the United States, which had been disrupted since 1949. On 9 September 1976, Mao's death, after several heart attacks, effectively ends the Cultural Revolution and brings Deng Xiaoping to power. Moving on to the main arguments of the book, Chang and Holiday argue that they have discovered an unknown Mao, whom they consider to have been an unprecedented madman. In their view, Mao was concerned only with himself, with power, and with conquest. He was unfilial, unmerciful, disloyal, perfidious, faithless to his comrades, unpatriotic to his country, unsympathetic to the workers and peasants, suspicious of Marxism-Leninism, provided little leadership, little in the way of political ideal, little communist morality, and little strategy. For this book, the authors visited many places Mao did when he was alive and went through many of the archives available in Russia and Eastern Europe. They interviewed many elderly CCP members with some connection to Mao. This helps constitute a comprehensive biography of Mao's life ranging from his birth all the way to his death in 1976. The incident at Xibaipo in 1948. On 30th November 1947, Mao became confident that he would win the civil war with the nationalists and proposed to Stalin that he should visit Russia. 3 months passed with no sign of invitation from Stalin, but this was eventually received in April 1948. On 10th May, days before Mao's self-appointed departure date, Stalin suddenly postponed the visit, and as spring slid into summer, there was no sign of him reviving his invitation. Mao was anxious to get going. He was with his colleagues at the party HQ at Xibaipo at the time, and they all knew that he was going to Moscow to see Stalin. The impression amongst those at the party HQ was that Mao was to leave any minute. One sign of this was that nothing was done to the frogs that were disturbing Mao's sleep. Ordinarily, any noisy animals like chickens and dogs were brought under control wherever Mao stayed. However, this was not done. In response to this, Chang and Halliday note that Mao felt the need to head off any negative impact of the delay and arranged for his bête noire, Wang Ming, to suffer another medical accident, where on 25th June he was given a urinal cleaner Lysol as an enema, which wrecked his intestines. Chang and Halliday used this incident to frame Mao as a selfish and egotistical man who was unconcerned with the health and well-being of his assistant and was more concerned with saving face. Although the book has been praised by Western media for exposing the unknown Mao, it has received criticism from academics for 3 main flaws. First of all, its bias, which makes it firmly set against Mao from its beginning. As David G. Goodman from the University of Sydney comments, Chang and Halliday are predisposed to write a demonography, with no ounce of good behavior or scintilla of higher purpose to be found in Mao. Another criticism of the book is that its handling of evidence is flawed, with numerous flawed assumptions about Mao made in the broader context. Another criticism of the book is its handling of evidence, with numerous flawed assertions about Mao in the broader context, as well as selective use or otherwise trimming or bending of sources to paint Mao in a bad light. As Timothy Cheek of the University of British Columbia comments, there is a similarity between Chang and Halliday's approach to Mao and the vilification of political enemies that was typical of the Great Cultural Revolution. Chang and Halliday's book is not a history in the accepted sense of a reasoned historical analysis. It is ironically a Maoist denunciation of Mao himself, done in the florid style of the Cultural Revolution denunciation, as Timothy Cheek comments. A third criticism of the book is its inadequate consideration of larger historical forces, which means it offers too simplistic and distorted of a view of events. Nathan also comments that it is hard to imagine a more panoramic subject in terms of time, geography, and historical forces, and yet Chang and Halliday focus tightly on Mao. Lost in the distant are the large forces of history that some might think explain the violence and longevity of Mao's regime. Given the findings of the book and the criticism that it has received, I would like to pose the 2 following questions. First, is the Mao that Chang and Halliday bring to light in Mao the Unknown Story truly that unknown? Also, given the criticism the book has received, what should one take away from its findings, and how might they have affected people's perceptions of Mao? Overall, Mao the Unknown Story provides a fresh and substantial look into the Mao beyond the policies and cult of personality, being filled with extensive source material that helps the reader gain a different perspective of the man and perhaps even aiding the reader in breaking down several myths and misconceptions they have held up till now. Despite controversy regarding its objectivity and accuracy, it is an insightful and digestible read for both the informed and uninformed that can help build a wider perspective of both Mao and his place in modern Chinese history. However, the controversy surrounding the book should also serve as caution to any reader to view Chang and Halliday's interpretations with a grain of salt. I do hope you've enjoyed this brief presentation on Mao the Unknown Story. Thank you for your attention, and please feel free now to ask me any questions.